There's a version of you that feels behind every time someone posts a photo in front of their new front door. You scroll past it, say something nice in your head, and then quietly do the math on your own life, your rent, your savings. The fact that buying a house feels like something everyone else figured out and you somehow missed the memo on. And underneath that comparison, there's a sharper feeling. Like renting means you're failing at adulthood in slow motion. Here's what I want you to sit with for a second. What if that feeling is based on a story that isn't even true anymore? What if some of the wealthiest, most financially secure people you'll ever meet aren't rushing into a mortgage at all? And it's not because they can't afford one. We were handed a very specific script growing up. Rent is throwing money away. Buying is building equity. A house is the foundation of wealth. Those statements don't feel like opinions anymore. They start sounding like facts, except that they were never really facts. They were timing, luck, and a housing market that behaved very differently 60 years ago than it does now. Hi, my name is Alpha, and in this video, I want to walk you through why so many financially secure people, the ones who actually have options, choose to rent, sometimes for years, sometimes indefinitely, and why that choice isn't the compromise we were taught it was. Stick around, because the part that surprises people most isn't about money at all. It's about what a house quietly costs you that never shows up on a mortgage statement. Picture this. Someone signs the papers on their first home. Everyone claps. There's a photo, a caption, a little sense of arrival. And then 18 months later, the water heater dies, the roof needs a patch nobody budgeted for, and the property taxes went up again without warning. Nobody claps for that part. Nobody posts that photo. But that's the actual experience of owning, just as much as the front door photo is. Let's talk about what owning a home actually costs, because most people only calculate one number, the mortgage payment, and stop there. A mortgage is the visible cost, insurance, maintenance, repairs, and the interest you pay in the early years of a loan. In the first several years of most mortgages, a large portion of your payment goes almost entirely toward interest, not toward the equity everyone talks about. You're paying the bank first, you get the equity later, slowly. Now compare that to renting. Renting has one number. It's predictable in a way, owning simply isn't. You know exactly what leaves your account every month, and when something breaks, it's not your problem financially. That's actually a form of financial safety that gets completely dismissed in the renting is wasting money conversation. Here's the psychological trap, and this is where it gets interesting. Humans are wired to value things we can touch and see. A house feels real. Equity feels real. A rent receipt feels like it evaporates. But money doesn't actually care how it feels. It cares about where it grows fastest and what it costs you to hold it. This is where the math quietly flips for a lot of people. If someone takes the difference between what a mortgage payment would cost and what rent actually costs and invests that difference consistently, the growth over time can rival or even outpace the appreciation of the home itself. Especially once you subtract everything a house silently demands: repairs, taxes, insurance, the years of paying mostly interest. Before I get into the part that really changes how people think about this, go ahead and hit the like button, drop a comment telling me whether you're a renter or a homeowner right now, and subscribe if you haven't yet. Okay, here's where it actually gets interesting. There's something else nobody talks about, and it might be the biggest one. A house ties you down in a very literal sense. If a better job shows up in another city, if a relationship changes, if your life needs to move quickly for any reason at all, a house is not a light backpack. It's an anchor with paperwork. Selling takes months. Selling costs money in fees and repairs. Owning locks in your geography in a way renting simply doesn't. And this is the part that connects everything back to psychology. Because flexibility isn't just convenient. Flexibility is a form of wealth that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. The freedom to leave a bad job because you're not locked to a 30-year loan tied to a specific zip code. The freedom to move toward opportunity instead of being financially cemented in place. Rich people, the ones who actually understand money as a tool instead of a scoreboard, protect that flexibility on purpose. They're not avoiding homeownership because they can't afford it. They're avoiding premature homeownership because they understand what it costs them in options. Let's slow down on that word, options. Because that's really what this whole video is about underneath the surface. Most people think the goal is the house. It's not. The house is one possible outcome of having enough financial stability to choose it deliberately, on your own timeline, not because a calendar year said you should have arrived. Think about the pressure most people feel by their late 20s or early 30s. Family asking when the house is happening. Friends posting closings. A quiet sense that renting past a certain age means something is wrong with your life. That pressure isn't financial advice. That's social pressure, wearing a financial costume. And a lot of people make one of the biggest purchases of their life to relieve a feeling, not to serve their actual numbers. Here's a real pattern worth noticing. Someone rushes into buying because they feel behind. They stretch their budget to afford it. Because houses in their area cost more than they expected. Now the mortgage is tight every month. Any emergency becomes stressful because there's no cushion left after the down payment. And the equity they were chasing takes years to actually mean anything, while the stress shows up immediately, every single month. Compare that to someone who rents a little longer than feels comfortable, but keeps their monthly costs low enough to actually build savings, actually build an emergency fund, actually invest consistently. When they do buy, if they buy at all, they're doing it from a position of strength instead of pressure. Same eventual goal, completely different foundation underneath it. Here's the shift I want you to really absorb, because once you see it, the whole renting versus owning conversation looks different. Owning a home was never actually the finish line. It's a tool, and like any tool, it's useful in the right circumstances and expensive in the wrong ones. The people who build lasting wealth don't ask, should I own a home? They ask, does owning a home right now serve my actual life, or am I buying it to satisfy a timeline someone else set for me? And underneath that question is something even bigger. This was never really about houses. It's about who's steering the decision, you, with your actual numbers and actual life, or a quiet social script that's been running in the background since you were a kid, telling you what a responsible adult is supposed to have by a certain age. Once you separate those two things, the anxiety around renting starts to loosen. Not because renting is automatically better, because the decision stops being driven by fear and starts being driven by math and timing that actually belongs to you. The goal isn't to rent forever. The goal is to buy from a position of strength instead of pressure. Start by actually calculating the full cost of owning in your specific area. Not just the mortgage number, but taxes, insurance, and a realistic maintenance estimate, because that number is always higher than people expect. Compare that honestly to your current rent, and if there's a gap, imagine that gap being invested instead of spent, and let that sit with you for a minute. Ask yourself, honestly, whether you're considering buying because it fits your actual 5-year plan, or because you feel behind compared to people around you. Those are two very different reasons, and only one of them tends to lead to a decision you feel good about later. If you do want to own eventually, let the timeline be yours. Build the emergency fund first. Get comfortable with your monthly cash flow first. Let the down payment come from genuine savings, not financial stretching. A house bought from stability behaves completely differently in your life than a house bought from pressure, even if the building itself is identical. And if renting is where you are right now, let that be a strategy instead of a source of shame. It might be the exact thing protecting your flexibility, your savings rate, and your ability to make a bigger move later, on your terms. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this. A house was never the proof that you made it. It's just one possible chapter, and only a good one if it's written on your timeline instead of everyone else's. You're not behind because you're renting. You might actually be ahead in ways that don't show up in a photo caption. Progress here isn't about matching someone else's milestone by a certain birthday. It's about making the decision, whenever it comes, from strength instead of pressure. If this shifts how you think about renting versus buying, hit that like button. Tell me in the comments whether you're renting by choice or by circumstance, and subscribe. The best financial decisions often feel boring in the moment, but they can change your future. I'll see you in the next one.